I don't know if you noticed, but today it is sort of nice out. I know that smog and that whatever that is out there is causing some problems, but it's June 1st, 2025. If you didn't think we were in summer, we are clearly now in summer, regardless of what somebody on the calendar says. It's the summertime. I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to some things for summer. I talked to Pastor, and he gave me permission to do something unorthodox. Now, not the teaching's going to be so crazy. It's just I'm going to take a 6-week series. We're going to add one extra week to it, which is good because I've got so much material. It could be a 40-week series, which would be boring, I bet. It'd be too much. But I'm going to break this one into 2 sections, which actually makes me very happy because there's a lot to talk about, and I would have to gloss over most of it if we didn't have a little more time. So to get to the good stuff today, we got 3 sections as always. Our first section is Egyptian culture, and I've got a question for you on the top of your sheet. How long does God need to perform a miracle? Kathy, I'm sure you know. How long does God need to perform a miracle? Instantaneous is the right answer. You're 100% correct. He can do it right now. But then the question is, why doesn't he? And that's the big part of the question. That's the part of the question we don't like to think about. Your healing could be now, right? This second, wherever you are. But it doesn't mean it will be. It does not mean it will be. And so thinking about that, it's kind of what we're looking at today. We're looking at miracles. We're looking at God's miraculous power. We want to think about why he does things the way he does them. Because we know, I think by now I've kind of hammered home the point that God makes plans and that God frustrates other people's plans and that plans are going to come to pass. But the miracles, it's a different issue. We are, Richard, you're right. We are God's hands and feet. We're definitely involved in God's miracles. You see, to review what we talked about before, God has been planning all these things from back to Abraham, with the covenant that he started with him. He told him, your children will be slaves of some sort. You'll be afflicted. I shouldn't say slaves. You'll be afflicted. And we know that ended up being slavery to some degree. But since Abraham, leader after leader after leader, God has raised up. Put them in the right place at the right time with the right person. Not just Israel's leaders, Egyptian leaders and Hyksos leaders, and all these other people are involved as well. And it gets to this place where God's making his plans known, and they're happening. And now he's equipped Moses. We talked about this last week. He's literally equipped Moses to be the everything man he needs him to be, to make this work as best it possibly can. And his name even means to draw forth, and he's ready to draw God's people forth. Mostly. Mostly he is. We talked about last time how Thutmose III was the co-regent with Hatshepsut. So on your first one here, it is Thutmose III who is the co-regent with Hatshepsut. And he has a son. So Thutmose III preceded the Exodus Pharaoh, by my estimation. And after today, I think, well, after next week for sure, you'll be able to agree with me or disagree with me. That's fine. But I think that's what it is. And in this case, it must be his son then that would match the criteria to be this Exodus Pharaoh. And Thutmose III has a royal son, Amenemhat. Egyptian names are weird. And he should be the next Pharaoh then. By the laws of Egypt, the king has a son. That son, the firstborn son, should be the next Pharaoh. But he's not. He dies. He's barely a blip in history because he dies very young before Thutmose III does. And so Thutmose III's second son is the one who takes the throne. And his name is Amenhotep, the second of his name. Kind of like they renamed the popes. He's Amenhotep the second. And he's a non-firstborn son. And that's what his picture... My wife even noticed in this, it looks very lifelike. Statue is very well done, and you can almost picture what he looked like in life. And it's probably fairly accurate because the Egyptians wanted to portray things as accurately as they could. And so that's pretty much what he looked like. Now you got to know a little bit about this guy. Pharaoh's hard heart. Egyptian records show that Pharaoh assumed the throne when he was 18. He reigns for 26 years. It's a very long reign. So he reigns into his 40s as the Pharaoh. And for a hard life and for what he does and for the different things he goes through, you can expect why that would be the case. But he starts at 18, which is fairly young for some pharaohs, and he rules vigorously. He's a real go-getter. In fact, he's arguably the most athletic of the pharaohs. He's like, could be an Olympian champion type style guy. He's very rough and tumble, very sturdy. And he decides to go out and do some things kind of like his father did. His powerful father got a lot of things done, and he's going to say, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do powerful and great things. And royal inscriptions for him show that he had 3 massive military campaigns. In his 3rd, 7th, and 9th years, he goes out to war with his war chariots. And he whoops them up. And he does such a good job that he takes back from the Levant, that coastal area where Semitic language is spoken, the Philistia type area, or Haran, like those areas near the Mediterranean, he takes back 100,000 slaves, which is unheard of for the time, to carry them back with him. Like he literally trots them all the way down. We're talking forced march of hundreds and hundreds of miles, 100,000 slaves. No one before in Egyptian history had ever done such a thing. But like I said, he's a real rough and tumble kind of guy. He likes to get things done. He wants to show off a little bit. He's good, and he knows it. And one of his foremost officials, the Vizier Rekhmire, adorned the walls of his mid-15th century tomb with paintings of Semitic slaves making bricks from mud, water, and chaff. The exact, and before this time unused recipe for making bricks. The one that the Bible talks about. The one that the Israelites had to make. And up until this time, that's not how they made bricks. They made them differently before this. So the timeline here matches beautifully. And he even put up paintings of it. There are Semitic people mixed in that group, and they're making, with the water, they're going down to the Nile and grabbing the clay and the mud from the Nile River, and they're collecting that up, and they're bringing it out, and they're forming the pieces, and they're mixing in the straw, and he gets this process done. What's really interesting is that on an inscription in the tomb, it says, rejoice, of Rekhmire's tomb, it says, rejoice, O prince, your affairs are flourishing. He says, you're doing great, kid. The treasure stores are overflowing. And in Exodus 1, if you go backwards a little bit in the story, the Israelite slaves constructed treasure cities. It's one of the things that they built was treasure cities because there's a lot of treasure coming in, these big campaigns. That matches beautifully. And in the Septuagint, there's this mention of this treasure city, Heliopolis. It's kind of like the city of the gods, if you will. And it's this beautiful treasure city, and Amenhotep is the god who rules Heliopolis. So the treasure city that was built by the Israeli slaves is very likely to be literally the one that he's in charge of. So it makes sense that he would be the one who says that this is what's happening. Manetho says that the name of the pharaoh during the Exodus was Amenophis, which is the Greek version of Amenhotep II. Now, it could have been one of the other Amenhoteps. It's possible. There's 4 of them. Could have been any of them. But it really seems to line up with the second one because of the way Hatshepsut and other things line up as well. And he's mostly known for his cruelty. He's known for his military conquests, of course. But if you're looking at your sheet, that second one is his cruelty. If you're really good, it makes sense to me that you would then be a little stuck on yourself. Lori, I'm sure, even thinking back to grade school, you knew which girls thought they were the prettiest and rubbed it in everybody else's face. And it didn't change your whole life. I'm sure you still know some people who think they're a little better, a little more blessed, a little more whatever it is. Trevor, I'm sure you felt the same way. I know you love basketball, and there was always some taller guy who was rubbing it in your face that you weren't quite as tall as he was. And of course, knowing you worked hard to show him up because you want to be excellent in everything you do. And he took it for granted that, I can just, and I'm sure there's a couple times you felt pretty good, pulling one over, dropping that fadeaway on him. It happens, right? But there's always these people out there in life who, they're bigger, they're tougher, they're stronger, they're smarter, they're something, and they get a little chip on their shoulder. And I'm pretty sure in all of history, very few people had a bigger chip than Amenhotep II. Whatever he set his hand to do, he seemed to do. He's enriching his nation, he's conquering his foes, and he likes to show it off. He tied them upside down to the bow of his ship as he sailed down the Nile. He let them dangle there in the sun on the way back home. And he decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to my town, and I'm going to cut their hands off, and I'm going to nail them to the wall. Trophies. And he dug a big trench. Probably had the prisoners themselves dig the trench. He filled it with the prisoners, and then he lit the whole thing on fire just to listen to him and let everybody else hear his conquest. And for fun, he would tie their hands to the chassis, the thing you stood on in the chariot, and he would drag his captives behind. This is not a pretty man. I'm sure he was good looking. We saw that he was good looking, talented, athletic. But he's not a good man. He's very cruel. So why do there have to be 10 plagues then? Sounds like God wants to wrap this up. This guy's a menace to society. I got to get him out of here. He's harming my people. He's causing problems. He's cruel. He's vicious. Why doesn't God just wrap it up in a night? In fact, I'm not even convinced he dies until well after the Israelites are gone. So why 10 plagues? Why not just one miraculous thing, right? Sodom and Gomorrah, afternoon, gone. No more. When Elisha prayed to reveal the angels, that next day, overnight, the whole army wiped out. They marched around 7 times Jericho. They lifted the trumpets, they blasted, they gave the shout of praise, and I think by the time that sound hit those walls, the walls had already started falling. Instantaneous deliverance. Why 10 plagues? This is like months of time. Why not just instantaneous? Well, there's a couple reasons. In Exodus 12:12, God says, against all the gods of Egypt, I'll execute judgments. This lesson is called the breaking of Egypt for a reason. He can't just let them keep going on the way they've been going on. Because the people of Egypt need a chance to know God too. But the children of Israel who've been in Egypt for hundreds of years now, they've gotten some Egypt on them. And worse, some of them gotten a little Egypt in them. Tom, you know what it is to have a little bit of the world in you. Didn't you? Wasn't there a time when you were living a life that you knew the stuff inside you was coming out your mouth? People could hear it. And it was in you. It wasn't just on you. It wasn't like, I was walking through, got a little dirty. The dirt was on the inside a little bit. And this is kind of the same idea, is they had gotten all this goo inside of them, this culture of Egypt, which is offensive to God and very self-gratifying and based on all these different things that weren't good for them, and it's kind of in them. And when they cry out, it doesn't say, this is one of the few times, like the judge, with the time of the judges, something's going wrong. They cry out to God to save them. And God sends a judge and God saves them. But before this, when they're in Egypt, the Bible does not say they cried out to God. It just says they cried out. They groaned under the burden that they had been put under. It doesn't say who they cried out to. And it is my guess that some of them might have been crying out to some Egyptian god. But God had already made promises to Abraham, so he knew who it was. And he was going to save them because they were his people. In Joshua 24, he's still dealing with this. Now therefore, fear the Lord, the I Am, Jehovah. Fear him. Serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Even though they left, even though they saw the miracles, even though they saw what was going on, some of them still served those same gods, even in the wilderness, even on the trail there, even into the promised land. Because Joshua still had to deal with this later. They hid them, they carried them with them. It was still part of this. So they had too much of Egypt kind of stuck in them. You got the slaves out of Egypt, but you didn't get the Egypt out of the slaves right away. It took time. And so, in this way, Egypt's religion kind of resulted in them not knowing who God was. So not only does Egypt not know who God is, but they don't know who God is either. I don't think Joseph had this problem. I don't think his kids had this problem, but somewhere along the way, some of them did have this problem. And I mentioned before, they were kind of a multicultural group. They might have brought in or married into some different people that had different beliefs. And so God has to make himself known. Even Pharaoh's like, I don't know who this is. But when Moses goes to talk back to the people, he's going to say, what am I going to say? Who sent me? When they ask the question, what is his name? Because they don't know him either, and they need to. So God's got to do some miraculous things in both camps so everybody can understand who he is. Now, religion in Egypt is interesting. They're a superstitious country. Very superstitious. Everything has a spiritual connection, and every action you take has a spiritual effect. It's related to something. Everything. I don't know if this is where the knock on wood comes from, but maybe it is. Right? How many of you have ever heard the phrase knock on wood? Anybody ever knock on the wood like, did you know that's meant to be calling up spirits of the wood? Now, we do it most of the time. We don't think about that kind of stuff. But there was a time when they literally thought this. I'm going to knock on the wood because the spirits of the wood are going to come out and help me, protect me. Or the salt over the shoulder kind of thing. Right? Such a superstitious thing. But this is how the Egyptians were. They were superstitious people. And so for 2,000 years of this long history, they have all these different gods that they talk to and think about for everything they do in life. There's a God for what you wear, and there's a God for where you walk, and there's a God for what you drink, and there's a God for what you eat, and there's a God for having babies, and there's a God for when you don't want to have babies, and everything. All of it. The word religion in Egypt is a foreign concept. They don't have a word for religion. Life and religion in Egypt are the same thing. We think, oh, well, that person's religious. Egyptians would be like, what do you mean? Which God are you referring to? Who's helping you or harming you? They didn't have a concept of being without religion. Religion was their concept. It was their culture. And every aspect of life in Egypt is tied to these gods. And the gods controlled what's called ma'at, justice or balance. And in some cases, ma'at is actually a god itself. It's a goddess of justice. And with that, order is the fabric of their culture. This is the goal. Everything is tied to order. And we would say religion, they would just say order. Their religion was a religion of order, of doing things the right way, having things set up just so. And it was based on and required the Pharaoh to execute some of these things through reciprocity and justice and truth and moderation. That was their goal. And yet their Pharaoh is not reciprocal. He's cruel and vindictive. And it's not justice to drag your victims behind you. And there's no truth or goodness in that kind of thing. And there's certainly no moderation. So Egypt's Pharaoh is opposite what Egypt's order is supposed to be, and it's definitely going to cause them some problems. You see, the Pharaoh is supposed to exercise decorum and affirm the gods, and he does that in the right ways, in like the statues and the depictions and the buildings he's building and the ways he treats people, but not with anyone else, not even with the poorest people in his nation, just for himself. He does the right steps. He is the original Pharisee, if you will. Death and connecting to the life after death are the central tenets of the religion. It wasn't just to go through life, but it was to prepare for your death and to go on to life after that. There are at least 7 gods that help escort you, guide you, lead you, help you, and resurrect you in the afterlife. At least 7 of them. 7 different gods help you go from this life to the next in their culture. It was a huge thing for them, and so anything related to that was very important then. But for God to help people, he'd have to unleash disorder of his own. He would have to show Egypt what things are really like, and more so, he had to show Israel what things are really like in Egypt before he can get rid of some of this, before he can move on. We got to talk about the magicians. Now, I know we don't call them magicians. Moses and Aaron are prophets, priests, right? Not magicians. But to Pharaoh, because they did miraculous things under the power of God, they were magicians. Because in Egypt, they had magicians, priests and people who were involved in the gods who could actually do supernatural things. My son even mentioned this the other day. He was like, Dad, well, it just seems so silly. People believe in all that witchcraft. And I said, I'm not sure it's silly. I think it's demonic. But to say that it doesn't exist, well, it's just superstitious. No, it's not. When the prophets of Baal cut themselves to try and light the altar and to get Baal to interact with them, they were committing blood magic. They just didn't understand they were going up a God who said no, and he put a stop to it. He held back any other kind of demonic power that could have helped them. But Egypt's got thousands of these gods and thousands of these priests and magicians. They've got all these different people who can do these great things, and so this is different for them. In Exodus 4, God gives 3 things he's supposed to show to Pharaoh. Now, this is before Moses whines a little bit and gets his brother to help out. So God says, this is what, Moses, you're going to do this. And the first one is to take the rod, and Moses throws it down, it turns into a serpent, and he backs away, he's scared of it. And God says, pick it up by the tail, and he does, and it turns back into a rod. Moses is like, oh, that's cool. And then he takes his hand, and he sticks it inside of his jacket, and he pulls it out, and it's leprous. And he puts it back in, and it comes out, and it's clean. Instantaneous transformation. And then he says, if those don't work, you're going to take some water, and you're going to pour it on the ground, it's going to turn to blood right then and there. Now, this isn't exactly how it pans out because, of course, Moses needs to learn some things too, and he's not quite ready to handle what God has for him, and so he whines a little bit. But the idea here is that afterwards, after this little bit here where he has to figure things out, Moses and Aaron went and told Pharaoh, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go that they may hold a feast for me in the wilderness. Go sacrifice in the wilderness. He does not say release them from their bondage. He says let them out. Why doesn't God say release them? Well, Pharaoh's not going to do that anyway. He wants to test Pharaoh, and he wants to, maybe there's a way out for Pharaoh, and Pharaoh just denies it. Maybe there would have been an easier way for this to work out. But it doesn't matter. Pharaoh says, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? Who's this guy? Who's this God that you talk about? I've never heard of him before. Do I know the Lord? Nah, I don't. I don't know this Lord, and I'm not going to let these people go. So in Exodus 5, it says, and the taskmasters of the people, in response to this behavior by Moses and Aaron, went out and spoke to the people, saying, thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. All these bricks you've been making that require straw to do it the right way, you don't get any. You need to get your own straw now, wherever you can find it, and then you can do your job. Craig Deline and Tom, you guys worked construction a long time. That'd be like the boss saying, get your own wood. What? I'm here to nail and finish. Get your own wood, Tom. That's crazy talk. That's crazy. Like, what do you mean get my own wood? Like, that's part of the job. Like, I show up on the site to get the what job done. I'm not going to, now maybe you had to go pick up a piece or two here or there. That makes sense, but this is different. And then the boss not only says get your own, but there's no change in the quota. They were slaves. They worked sun up to sundown. There's no extra time in the day. They probably were barely making it what they were doing before, and now they've got to go out and collect their own hay wherever they can find it. They can't do it. It's literally, he says, this cruel Pharaoh says, do this impossible thing. And of course they can't. And Moses gets after God for it. He returns and says, Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Why are they going through something right now, God? Why, you said you were here to deliver them, and here they are. It's worse off than before. Why have you even sent me? Why have you even sent me? Gets a little pity party in there. For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people. He's getting worse. And neither have you delivered your people at all. And of course, like in the fashion he would with Job, the Lord says to Moses, now. you shall see what I will do. I was holding back a little bit for a second because I needed you to know Moses. I needed you to know Aaron. Even you didn't believe I could do these things. Now watch me work. For with a strong hand, Pharaoh will let them go. And with a strong hand, he will drive them out of his land. Not only is Pharaoh he's not just going to let you walk into the wilderness for a sacrifice. He is going to release you and kick you out the door. You're gone. Moses is probably thinking, what? I was just hoping to leave a little bit. We could sneak out, do some sacrifice, and run. And God says, no, he's going to tell you to leave. He's going to tell 1 million+ slaves who build bricks for him every day that you need to go. A guy who is dedicated to huge monuments in his own honor is going to give up the thing that will allow him to build them. Not a chance. Now, it doesn't say the disease hand happened in this account. We know that God showed him this, but it doesn't actually say it happens in the account. So in Exodus 7, when they go, it says that Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them. So it is my guess that they did, in fact, put their hand in their shirt and pull it out because, as we talked about before, Manetho reported that there was a leprous person, a leprous priest, who tried to convert all these other people and go against the Pharaoh. Well, Shawnee, I don't know about you, but if somebody put their hand in their jacket, pulled it out, and was leprous, I would think they're contagious, whether they pulled it out clean or not, right? Once you've seen it, it's oh, that's creepy. He's infected in something. So it makes sense to me that Manetho would get this kind of wrong. And interesting besides. How many of you have ever seen this God before? Probably not. I'd never either. It's an interesting fella, isn't he? There's a lot of jokes online about where he wears his pants. Nehebkau is the god of protection. He's an ancient god. He's considered powerful and benevolent. He helps people. Not all the gods of Egypt are benevolent. Some of them are they just hold back. They're kind of removed. And some of them are antagonistic, but most of them are helpful. And this one is supposed to be always helpful and protective. And he's the companion of the sun god Ra. Ra's the king of the gods, and he's his bro. What's up, bro? Hey, bro, what's up? And they're chilling together, taking care of business in Egypt. And he helps attend deceased kings. He's the guy who, when the Pharaoh dies, they trust in Nehebkau to help them move on to the afterlife. And his name is evoked in magical spells for protection. And his festival is widely celebrated in the middle, and particularly in the New Kingdom, which is what we're talking about right now, that 18th dynasty, particularly celebrated. He's the original snake. He's the OG. And he was believed to have done all these great things. He emerged from the earth on his own. He was not created. He's just, I'm so great, I just made myself. And this idea of snakes swallowing other snakes is kind of a religious refrain in Egypt. It's something they would have understood really, really well into how this works, because according to the coffin text spells, Nehebkau swallowed 7 cobras, the most deadly poisonous vipers in Egypt, and he just eats them up, which gave him the power against harm from other magic. No other magic could harm Nehebkau. He was the OG. He had eaten up with the snakes. He was immune to magic. And he's the central god of the Egyptian afterlife. He helps them reunite the dead with the living soul. So their living soul separates from their body, and he has to reconnect them at these giant mortuary palaces. And in Exodus 7, Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and his servants. Everybody sees it. And became a serpent. And I'm sure they thought, whoa. The Pharaoh himself is going to be escorted and reconnected with his soul by Nehebkau. And this guy just threw down a stick and it became a snake. Magically, miraculously. So the Pharaoh, instead of being impressed, he says, all right, you guys, my magicians, come on, get up here. Show them what's up. And they come up, the sorcerers and the magicians of Egypt, and they did in like manner. They throw on their stick, and a bunch of snakes come out. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. In the name of the Lord, this snake eats up all the others. Who's got the power now, Neheb-cow? Who's protected from magic now, Neheb-cow? And who's going to protect the Egyptians now that he's here? Well, if you're Moses and you're paying attention, you already know the answer. But if you're Egyptians, you might be a little stubborn, a little hard-hearted. The Hebrew rod swallowed them all up, and God proved they had no protection. There was nothing to protect them now. The pharaohs believed in this so loudly, so strongly, that on their foreheads, like, you know, the priests of Egypt or of Israel always wore like the Shema on their forehead, like they kept the word of God close to their face, right? In Egypt, they kept symbols, and the two symbols they have here are the vulture and the cobra. Now, this isn't Neheb-cow, but snakes were such a big part of Egyptian culture that they wore them on their forehead to show that they were rulers and protectors of areas. This is King Tut. You might have seen his golden head before. And he's got this right there on his forehead. And this is part of what they did. This is part of who they were. This is the identity they took. That as the Pharaoh, I'm going to control the order. I'm going to protect. I'm going to. And right now, the protectorate God has been swallowed up. Because God already knows their playbook. He knows their plans, their outcomes, what they want to do, and he knows how to beat everything they've got. Through these actions, it's not just Neheb-cow that's bothered, it's other snake deities as well. The most famous, which is Wadjet. And you can see in the corner there's an eye of Horus. It's like a really big portion of Egyptian culture and religion. And on one side is the vulture, and the other side is the snake. One represents the upper, and one represents the lower Egypt. And this is what they ruled through the power of the gods. And the lower Egypt, the one that God's people live in, God just swallowed up. You don't have power over the lower Egypt. You don't have power over my people, he says. That's where Goshen is located. So Pharaoh's response, the Lord has shown himself to be greater than their gods, able to override any protection and claim dominion over lower Egypt. God said, Pharaoh didn't say this, God said that Pharaoh's heart is hard. It already is hard. He's already calloused himself. I don't know about you, but if I drug people behind me and nailed them to walls and hung them upside down from ships, like, of course I would have a hard heart too. We try and keep kids from doing those kinds of crazy. We don't like kids to be violent towards little animals or towards other people. We try and get that out of them when they're young, because otherwise you end up like this guy with a hard heart. And it always bugged me when people said, well, that's not fair that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. God didn't do anything to harden his heart. God did actions to help him understand, and his heart hardened every time because he was already that guy. And he refuses to let the people go, as you know. The scoreboard. Rods of snakes for both sides, give them a point each. Fair enough. But the Egyptian snakes get eaten, sounds like God's one up on them. Now the plagues. The part you've all been waiting for, the plagues of Egypt. The nitty-gritty. Introducing Osiris. Now, if you study Egypt, you might recognize this guy's name. They had weird green skin, some of these people, and this is the god that they killed and cut up into pieces, if you remember the story. His son and somebody else chopped them all up and got rid of him, or his brother, I think. And he's the god of fertility, vegetation, and agriculture. He's the god in the underworld who basically pushes spiritually all the goodness up into our world and causes things to grow and to produce and to be wonderful. It's his job to push the spiritual nature from one side in the afterlife into the living side where we are. That was his job. And in Egypt, the most important resource they have is the Nile. It's the river itself. It's the resource they use for their food and their clothing and their writing and their agriculture. It's what they use to make their bricks. It's everything to them. And Osiris is the embodiment of it. He is the Nile in their minds. In their minds, Osiris and the Nile are the same thing. When you think of the Nile, there's a spirit involved in the Nile. It's Osiris. It's not separate things. He is the Nile. Like, there's a physical part of it, but he's the spirit behind it all. And he's the one who helps all these things happen. In Exodus 7, it says, Moses and Aaron did so just as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod, the same rod that turned into a snake that just proved the Egyptians foolish, the same rod that swallowed up their rods and wouldn't let them do these great things, and he smites the waters. Whoosh. In the sight of Pharaoh and the sight of his servants, everyone gets to see it again. All the waters in the river were turned to blood. And not just the waters in the river, but basically any open water source, the jars and the buckets and the pots at home, all of it turns to blood. Most of you have no idea what I just said or why it's important then. Because you're not Egyptian. It makes sense you wouldn't. Osiris, the chief deity of the chief resource of the entire country, just got made a fool of. Within minutes, fish start floating in the river. Plants wilt. Animals escape it. Crocodiles and hippos and snakes. They flee it because it's now a source of death, not life. They turn the living water of Egypt into a cesspool with a single strike. And they defamed their most famous god, the one they cherished. The Nile River is the bloodstream of Osiris. That's literally the words they use, the bloodstream. It is the blood that flows within Osiris is the Nile River. His own blood nourishes them. We sing about an old rugged cross, about the blood Jesus shed. And I'm so thankful no one can ever come against that blood. Because I don't know what I would do if they did. If they did, you'd have to say everything we know is a lie. Now, put yourself in their shoes. What did Moses and Aaron just prove? Everything they knew was a lie. Was there power in some guy named Osiris? Maybe there was. Maybe there's a demon, and he had that power, and he helped them with that. But it doesn't matter whether he's a demon or not. He is not the power. And so it's messed up for them. Everything they know might be a lie now. The miracle attacked other gods as well, not just Osiris. Khnum, Happy, Sopdet, right? Nu, Naunet, Tufnut, Nehet, Weret, Hatch, Hat, Michet. Dozens of them. They had gods for the Nile flooding. They had gods for the fish in the Nile. They had gods for everything that happened in the Nile was important to them. And all of them were just made of no effect. Not just some of them. The whole dream, Egypt's dream team just went down the toilet in a single strike. Talk about a shake to your faith. Pharaoh's magicians successfully recreate this plague. And I always wondered, how'd they do this? If all the water is blood, how'd they do this? Well, not all the water is blood. The water that was showing was blood and stayed that way for 7 days. But if you dig a trench, the water that's been filtered and still in the ground did not change. So they had to dig wells to find water to do this and to drink. But they still do it. They still make it happen. They change it to blood as well. And Tuararet, the crazy-looking Egyptian god who's supposed to purify the water, couldn't do it, couldn't take care of it for him. They couldn't undo what God had done. It's Pharaoh's response. Continues for an entire week. And Pharaoh, instead of changing his attitude, changing his mind, like most prideful people, doubles down and hardens his heart and refuses to obey God's command. And the scoreboard, they copied them too. Got to give them credit where it's due. They have magical powers on their side. They're doing demonic something. But God not only did what they did, but he would not let them undo it. So he's one up on them again, 4-2. Egyptians have a frog god, Heket, the goddess of childbirth, midwifery, and resurrection. Now, if you don't think this has anything to do with Thutmose' destruction of baby boys, you'd be kind of silly. God's putting them right back in their place where they need to go, and Pharaoh has no choice but to understand this. His dad was doing this. His grandpappy was doing this. They know this is what's going on. And Heket, this god, this frog god, does some of these things. And so the river will bring forth frogs abundantly into your house, your bedroom, your bed, the servants, the people, the ovens, the kneading bowls. There's not a place in Egypt these frogs were not in. I cannot imagine the nastiness that provided. Frogs are gross anyway, but then they have to go to the bathroom and they're hopping on things and croaking all night long. How many of you like the sound of frogs at night in the springtime when they get out there? It's kind of, in the distance in some swamp, it's kind of pretty. Anybody ever had it right next to your house? Oh, they're loud. Yeah? Greg, you've had that? They're loud. Now imagine them in your house, in your bed, hanging on the walls, in the fridge with a bowl of... No, absolutely not. I cannot imagine this. And they're everywhere. It's gross. It's dramatic. Like, Heket should be in charge. She should be helping out with these frogs. And no, she can't. They're everywhere. They're over-multiplied like the Israelites had. And as much as these things come in here, they pour out of the Nile. And if I had to hazard a guess, if the Bible doesn't say, I know which region they came from and how they spread all the way into all parts of Egypt anyway. In Exodus 8:8, then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs. Entreat him. Beg, please, beg God to take these away. Even Pharaoh can't handle this. If you do this, I will let you go. I'll let you go out and sacrifice. If you get rid of these frogs out of my house, I will let you. And of course, the second that happens, he changes his mind. Pharaoh hardened his heart. He did not heed them. Pharaoh hardened his heart, the Bible says. Not God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh hardened his own heart based on God's actions. The scoreboard. Called up frogs by both sides again. They both did it, so they both get a point. But even after they prayed and begged God, get these out of our houses, they piled them up in heaps and let them out to rot. And the entire land of Egypt stank. Reeked. You choked on the fumes of it. I'm sure there wasn't a person who didn't walk around with a handkerchief trying to get some of that out of their mouth because you had to taste it. It would be so thick. We think like the smog, that smoke from the fires is bad. Oh, no. 6-3. The last one we have for today is Geb, the god of the earth, the reliable, the trustable one, the natural one, the base one, the terra firma. I'm on the ground. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but Egyptians' religious leaders went to extreme lengths to keep themselves clean and pure. It was like a hallmark. It was part of order, right? Cleanliness next to godliness. It's probably where it actually comes from because the Bible doesn't say it. Especially of things like lice and parasites. They removed their eyebrows. They would paint them on with marker, with the little coal sticks. They scraped them all off. No eyebrows, no hair. They would keep that little beard thing in the tight little wrap, and that's it. Because they didn't want parasites. And Herodotus, the famous Greek guy, he says that with this kind of thing, this is what they did. They shaved their whole bodies. They wore linen only. They had shoes made from papyrus, the plants by the river. They bathed in cold water twice a day and twice at night. 4 baths a day. Try and get your kids on board of that. And to observe innumerable other ceremonies besides. It's just not a thing. These are neat freaks, the cleanest people you probably ever met. For Aaron stretched out his hand and his rod again, the same rod that swallowed the snakes. Dust of the earth came up, and it turned to lice. Now, we don't know if it's exactly lice. The Hebrew word here doesn't mean lice, but it doesn't mean parasite, it means blood-sucking. That's connective, right? They're on you, and they're getting something from you. It's gross. And they were on man and beast everywhere, throughout the entire land. And while some people probably were used to lice, there were poor people in Egypt. There were slaves in Egypt. They were probably used to picking off lice. Yeah, it's just more of them, fine, whatever. The priests, the hairless, 4 times bathing priests, oh no. With their homes and their bodies crawling with lice, the priests tell Pharaoh. The priests turn on Pharaoh and say, this is the finger of God. Whatever God this is his finger. Not like the hand of God where it's really big and tough. Not the arm of God where he's like destroying, but this is the finger of God. He's punishing us. No doubt. They knew, the priests who had been proved all their gods were lies now, knew this was the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart grew hard. Did not heed them. The scoreboard. This is where Egypt's score stops because they can't keep up anymore. And God makes the lice, and he does not allow them to leave until it is time for them to leave. And the Egyptian priests and magicians fail for the first time. God knows Egypt and her arrogant ruler. Moses didn't trust himself, so God gives him Aaron to help. Everything happens as God predicted it would, and the systematic destruction of Egypt's gods has begun. Well, wait, I thought you already Oh no, that's only 3 plagues and a starter, just an appetizer. We have not even hit the main course. God's word is true and will come to pass. If you guys want some more cool resources, of course, I have them for you. You can look at the Exodus Pharaoh. It's a nice article. If you want the video version, which is a little bit easier to get into, although it's a little bit longer, you can go watch that. Or if you just need a little primer on gods of Egypt, you can certainly go look at those. You guys have been great today. I hope you have a fabulous day. You've got some time now to go rejuvenate yourselves, use the restroom, talk once with each other, and we'll see you back here at 11 for worship. God bless.